I studied fine art at Duncan of Drawnstone in Scotland. At the time that was a very academic Scottish college, and compulsory drawing once a week and painting, quite rigorous. I started to have shows while I was still at college, so I was already selling a few pieces. I went off and disappeared to Australia for 12 months, not really with permission from college, and nearly failed my degree because of that, but they wrote me a letter and told me to hurry up and come back. I got my degree, and but by that time I was already selling. So I'd had a few quite successful shows, and pretty much straight from leaving college, I went to France and lived and worked and set up my studio in Paris. And that was fantastic. I spent 7 years in Paris, and Paris was very, very good to me. I met lots of very influential people who, gave me a helping hand. And, and I was very lucky. You've got to see your luck, you've got to make your luck, but also, I was fortunate at the time. And then moving on from there, I developed a studio. I got myself a dealer, started to sell paintings internationally, had some good shows in Australia and California and around the world. And it all looked as if it was going to be spectacular for a while. Needless to say, it wasn't. A lot of things changed. I think as I got older, into my mid-30s, I realised that I just wasn't that good a painter. And I wasn't going to create these big paintings that, I'd left college full of enthusiasm. I wasn't going to do it anymore. I think making the shift from being an artist to a businessman actually came fairly naturally. And I think I didn't really question it. It felt just like another step on my own road, if you like. Literally, I suppose because I was feeling a bit cynical, a bit out of sorts, upset with everything, my antennae were out, and I was looking for something to do. I didn't really have any particular guidance, but I knew I couldn't continue painting. I happened to meet somebody in a bar in Soho who showed me a little piece of plastic, and he connected a battery to it, and this thing illuminated. Not having that science background, I thought this was absolutely fantastic, and I was completely seduced by the technology. I was intrigued enough to do a bit of due diligence, find out what it was about, raised a very small amount of money to support that due diligence process, and realised fairly quickly that the individual I'd met really didn't have any claims to the technology whatsoever. But what it did do was set me thinking about this path, set me thinking about I could do something differently. I then, during the process of due diligence, met another man who had got some claims to the technology. He was doing some research in the area. So one day I literally called the company in Bournemouth that had some claims to the technology and went down. We had a board presentation, a meeting, ended up in the pub for a lunchtime pint, and we struck a deal. And we said, okay, well, we're going to set up a company. He put some money into the company. I set it up to run. And we created something new. We created a company called Illuminate, which went on to be one of the largest printed electronics companies in the world. What we started to do was do some real fundamental research into inorganic materials. And I had a slightly unusual approach to the business, in so much as I realised fairly early on that my customers weren't necessarily interested in a boring old business run by a boring businessman. I started to sponsor artists, and I started to create things, objects, artifacts. These artifacts in turn went off to all the shows all over the world, and we created, if you like, this momentum. And in turn, I realised that it was working for me. I mean, this was accidental. After the fact, fairly early on though, but after the fact, I realised that through the sponsorship of the artists, we were getting a degree of visibility and communication, sales and marketing. That was a very, very powerful tool. And I realised it one day when I was I was invited to go to see Mercedes' advanced design team in Lake Como in Italy. And I walked into this room, and all the tendance boards, all the mood boards all over the room were the front pages of the magazines or double page spreads of magazines of artists that I'd sponsored. Nothing to do with the company, nothing really to do with the technology. It was all about, what can this technology do? What does it look like? And I realised at that point that the people who were designing and building the next generation of Mercedes cars all went to art school. and they all get it. They all understood this visual vocabulary, if you like. And then when I realised that, I started to build on it. And I think, having this arts degree background has stood me in very good stead, because in the one sense, I'm quite a good businessman, but in the other sense, I have the vocabulary and the empathy and the understanding to talk to the audience. And I can walk into a room full of architects or designers or industrial designers, whoever, and understand their point of view and where they want to get to, but also the process that they are going to go through while we work on these collaborative projects, because I understand that thinking, that way of doing things, which I think probably gives me a small advantage. I don't know how big an advantage is, but and if I was coming to that dry without having had those experiences, those formative years of working in the studio, that studio practice, the learning by the doing, then I think I would have been missing a trick. I moved into my current company, Polyphotonix, with a different intent. I knew that we wanted to make something big in terms of company size and potential. And we started to research organic chemistry, organic polymers with light emitting capabilities. So even to get into this world required a step change in terms of finance. We set off with a path to look at lighting and areas, research in that areas. And we've morphed over the years into medical research. And now we have all kinds of medical devices that are coming through. So what's quite unusual in the current company, and there's two or three of us without PhDs. Everybody else in the company is a doctorate of either physics, chemistry. We're all geeks, really. And what we're doing is, we're working with 7 universities in the UK. There's a couple of more universities abroad. We're funding postdoc positions, we're funding KTP programs, and we're funding the fundamental research. And we take that fundamental research and we have the ability to incubate it, turn it into a process, and then find an application for it. I think one of the most valuable things I learned at art school was, it's fairly difficult to articulate really, but there's a sense of adventure, and there's a willingness to take the risks, and you have to take those risks all the time in the studio. And they don't say, if you're not a painter, you don't come from that world, you don't necessarily think you're taking these big risks in your studio, but you are. You're making these very hard decisions all the time with no fear. So there's a sense of learning in the doing, I think. So what I think my research teams are doing, the way I guide them, is to work with it sounds a bit glib, but it's almost like a suck it and see. Don't be afraid. Let's see if that's going to do. Put that in there and just have a look, because you might be surprised. I think the thing that drives me in my current business is the fact that pretty much daily we are creating new things. I find myself in a room full of very, very clever doctors of physics, chemistry, biology. These people are all at the top of their game, and we are making this cross-discipline transfer whereby we are discussing things that in some cases haven't really been discussed before. It's brand new, it's new science. The second big thing is some of the applications that we're now researching are medical based, and they will have the ability to really help people's lives. In one particular application we have is going through its final phase 3 clinical trials, and in the next couple of years it's treatment for a particular type of blindness. This will change people's lives around the globe. It's big things. So that's obviously a big kick, that's self-explanatory. And I think the third thing that really drives me is, in the way that I used to create artifacts, paintings, I'm creating something here with the business. And I used to have this idea of legacy when I was young and youthful and full of spirit. I used to think that the paintings I was doing would live beyond myself, beyond my own import. And I think that's what I'm trying to create in some sense here. Am I trying to create that? I don't know if I'm trying to create it, but it's part of it. It's the idea that this notion of this company with all its employees and all the people and all those little human stories that come into creating that, and I have some sense touching all these different people's lives, and I'm just part of it, I'm in the mix as well. We're creating something here that is, it is a legacy, it's got some import, and that's a nice feeling as well. When I made that transition, that very, very difficult transition to stop painting and do something else, I remember quite clearly, you know, it broke my heart. It was a very, very difficult time. But also when I did make the decision, it was very liberating as well. And it was a weight lifted off my shoulders. I didn't have to paint that big painting. You know, that painting was going to change the world. Thank God I don't have to do that anymore. And that was fantastic, and that was a great feeling. So no, I'm not an artist. I'm doing something else, but still passionate about the arts.